Perfect. Welcome to today's session. This is Amber Bell from Training Dynamo. Thank you so much for joining us today. Sorry, I had my news up. We have Marlena on the call as well. I don't know if she wants to jump in and say hi at some point, but I just want to give a quick overview of DexPro and have Marlena do that. And then Marlena, I'll take it away.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you again, Amber. It's our pleasure to have such a great trainer and, have you share your knowledge with everyone who's willing. And we want to thank you for all of that. And we want to also add that with the changes in our industry, we see a lot of clients not getting the proper support for GP. So feel free to contact us, or me directly. And we can offer free system evaluation, high-level system evaluation as needed. So I hope you will see how to use your tools that you own today. And that's part of the series that Amber is going to be doing today.
Perfect. And I know one of the things a few months ago, I think it was last year, Marlena and I were talking about all of the things that are included in GP that we just time and again have found that customers don't know about, or we meet new customers or people that have used GP for many years and were never told about these tools. So as we put together our list, we came up with these top things that people weren't using. We've covered several of them so far, and they were recorded, like today is being recorded. And those are available for download from or review from the DexPro site. I'll have the link at the end of today's session. And if you scroll down on that page, the GP training page, you'll be able to see the sessions we've done in the past that are each about an hour long. We also do full half-day classes or more for things like GP or Power BI. And I'll talk about that again at the end. As Marlena also mentioned, DexPro does a free system review, and part of that is making sure you're using these tools. So as we talk to customers, we see what issues are they dealing with, what workarounds have they had to do because they didn't know about things, and then we implement and get those up and running. So today's session is all about something called the Professional Services Tools Library. It's a lot of letters, but a lot of words. So a lot of times people will call it just the PSTL tools, or you'll even hear people say like pistol, So when they're talking about pistol or the Professional Services Tools Library or PSTL, it's all the same thing. These tools have been around for many, many years. Some were added and changed and moved over time, and I'll talk about some of those as they come up. But they used to be tools you had to buy one at a time. And somewhere on my computer, I have the old price list, and it was like, this one was $500, this one was $1,500, this one was, and after you bought so many of them, you'd hit a number, then they'd throw in the rest for free. But by then you'd already paid $2,500, $3,000 or something dollars. So it's such a great thing that they've rolled these into standard GP with no extra cost, but there is additional installation. It's just a little bit of installation on the, DexPro side, but some of them do require some setup. The reason they're not automatically installed is some of them are things you want to be careful of. They are going to act more like utilities. So we want to make sure the right people can access. And some of these tools, I don't mention it in here. I do have a link to the Microsoft documentation about it, but some of the tools actually require that you run them as a system administrator. So if you want to run them as an administrator, they're just protecting against. And we're going to see time and again, you'll see some repeats in my descriptions to say, this won't do this, run a backup. Like if in any tool that's updating, you're going to see my reminders about that coming up. So quick little information about me. I've been working with GP for over 20 years. I started out in California. I live now in Connecticut. So we're all over the world and all over the country here at DexPro, but it's been a privilege to get to know so many fun customers and exciting challenges and opportunities that I've had, really helping people get more out of what they do with GP. I also do user workbooks, and you can get those discounted through DexPro if you're ever interested. So just reach out and we'll get you a discount code so that you can save a few bucks on those if you're interested. Next thing is the Professional Services Tools Library. Well, what is it? I'm going to open it up in my GP, and a lot of today is demos, but I went through and I made the slides give you a description. But after I did that, I realized I also gave you the link to the page. So if I was you, you can always download. I'll get these slides over to Haley, because I gave you my 2 cents on some of them and cut the description down to a sentence or two. But there's more information available on the Microsoft documentation site, or docs.microsoft, and you'll see that link coming up soon. I can do this just for fun. I'm going to copy the link we have. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into the chat. And when you see that pop up, if you have any questions as we go ahead and type those questions into the chat, and I'll try to get to those during our session today as well. Okay, so here we go. So the Professional Services Tools Library, let's go ahead and, oh, this is a spoiler. How much does it cost? It's free. The actual tools themselves are free. So if you don't see this when you log into GP, a couple of things, it could either be not installed on your workstation, security might have been set so you don't see it. There might be some settings, or it might just not be installed. So if you don't see it, that's a quick email to support@dexprodynamics.com. They can work with you, check out what's going on. So I'm going back into GP. I'm on my home page here, and you'll notice on my sidebar, I have PSTL. On a lot of systems, it may look like this, if I can get this to crunch up the right way. It might look like this, and you'll just see a kind of light blue gear. But if I drag this up, you'll see PSTL. If I right click over here and hit navigation pane options, it may be that PSTL doesn't show there, or it does show. And if you see one that says customer experience, some exemption or something like that, if it says the word customer exemption or experience something, I've noticed that when people have had a messed up installation of PSTL. So again, just let DexPro support know and say, I can't get to it, but I do see this wacky one called customer something, and we'll check if that's what's going on with your system. GP Power Tools is an add-on tool, definitely something fun to take a look at, but we're going to look at what's included today. Okay, so we're going to go into here. So here's my Professional Services Tools library. Now, I'd highly recommend keeping this window secure. I do not want you to see this and know just enough, and remember just enough of today's session to be dangerous. I want you to know what's out there. Some of them are really great. Some of them are really scary because they are utilities. So I'm going to explain them to you and tell you which ones are no brainer. You can turn them on, give access to them. Other ones you'll want to test and test and test, because they could cause issues if you don't use them properly, or depending on your system setup. So don't just leave this screen that everybody opens up. The other thing is, if there's a tool that you use a lot, I'm going to show you, for example, receivables on Apply. This is a spoiler. We're going to do this in a bit, but I don't want to ever open from this window again, because again, there's too many scary tools in there. I can just hit File, Add to Shortcuts. File, Add to Shortcuts. That's not only for that window. That's a bonus tip. That works all over GP. And see down here, it says 2, because I had it up here already, because I'd already added it. So that's a duplicate. We'll just delete that one. So we've got the receivables transaction unapply there. That works with other windows as well. So for example, if I went to vendor credit and I did tools, file, add to shortcut, that'll add on that sidebar as well. So it's just a little bonus tip. So we're going to go in and take a look at some of these tools. Okay. What types of tools are included? There are system tools, there's financial tools, purchasing tools, sales tools, payroll tools, inventory tools, and miscellaneous tools. So there's lots of tool types. You'll see that in that past screen we saw. That's how they're broken down. But what I did was I broke those into different slides. Now I put a warning in here. Warning, because I want this to be, if this is testimony in court that you did something crazy in your system, that I can say, watch the video. I clearly told them anything that updates any data or master records or any stuff like that, do a backup. Some of these just turn on some options, so they're not going to change data. So you don't need a backup for that. But definitely, if you're not sure, check with Dex Pro support and say, I want to test this one out. We connect and we just make sure it doesn't do anything kooky. Sometimes even the simple tools, if you have a really persnickety integration or third-party tool, it may not allow that. So anytime you're talking about these again and again, I always say test, test, test. So they are powerful tools. Test them in your test company first. Okay. So the system tools. I highlighted my favorite tool in the window in this slide. There's other slides that I have, and I highlighted ones as well. So the first one that I highlighted is shortcuts copy. Sorry, excuse me. If I go into GP, you notice how right now I have all these nice shortcuts and drop downs and all this nice work I've done. And let's say that I got it set up perfectly. This is a wonderful bunch of shortcuts for my new accounting manager. They're taking over, I'm getting a promotion, or I won a contest, I'm retiring. So at this point, I don't want to make them keep using my user ID, because I've seen customers who do that. They say, oh, Tim, he quit 10 years ago, and Barbara, she's from 3 years ago, but they had the best setup. So I want you to give, Melissa, Tim's setup. So I'm going to have her log in as Tim. And instead of even copying their user or anything, they just have them log in as that person, even though they've been gone for 10 years. So there's ways in the administration where when you're setting up a new user that you can copy things like you can copy their security, company access, things like that. But one of the things you can't copy is from that window is this side toolbar. So that's where we would come into PSTL, go into the screen, click on shortcuts copy, sorry, it's tiny, and hit next. Now what this allows you to do is to copy from one user and copy to another user. Now what this will do is it will overwrite that other user's shortcuts. So if they had 15, 20 they loved, it may be better to just have them manually create the 5, 10 ones that they needed to add. But it is a great way if you're creating new users to really improve their setup. I'm going to close that. I'm not going to hit copy because I can't remember what I have on that other user. Now, Toolkit, I had to look this one up because I couldn't remember. You had to use it. And I put in red, only uses Dex Pro support, because if you look in the documentation, which I have that open here, and if you look in Professionals Tools Library, do they have a drop? No, you can't jump. So I have the old manual. And by the way, if anyone wants the old manual, it might be a little outdated, but sometimes it's nice to have. Just message Haley or support at Dex Pro, and I'll get you guys the link or just the file, because I had downloaded it years ago. So the one that is called the toolkit, that's going to be around page 18, because it's a couple pages off. And what this toolkit does is once I see recreate SQL objects, and once I see GL tables are getting redone, and all this scary stuff that if I don't hit a box, I'm going to delete all the data, I put my hands away from the keyboard, I step away, and I say, no, not for me. I'm going to have that done through Dex Pro support. And even for me, on my level, I'll have another person come in and help me, because if we're getting to something where something got messed up enough that we need to do these recreates, there may be better tools. We may need to put in a support case with Microsoft just to be extra sure. So don't just go and crazy click that, because it sounds like a no big deal one and it's a big one. Okay, next. The menu inquiry utility, I took a look at this one, and what it does is it shows all windows, even ones that are not used or that are hidden from security for administrators and developers and people like that are setting up security, so that they can figure out what the window is from and get product information. So it's not like something you need to use any day to day. The update user. Now there's good things about this, and you may turn this on. and I'm great if you do. And if you have a workstation that has to run overnight, maybe it can't run in the background, it has to have a GP running login because it does batch posting overnight, or it does some kind of integration. If it's running all the time, there's a way to turn on automatic date updates at night. You have to turn off that. Do you want to change the date? There's a setting you have to change for that, and you have to turn this on. Now, that's a great thing, but you really should be closing GP nightly. If you do run those not utilities, but integrations and things, and they have to have an active user, most don't, they can go direct behind the scenes. But if they do, we may help you turn this on if that helps make things a little more consistent with dates and things like that. Okay. Financial tools. You'll notice I highlighted the account modifier and combiner. Now, what this account modifier and combiner does is if I go into my GP and I go into my PSTL tools and I go to, now I am running a 100% test, does not have 1 inch of real data in it. And if I destroy it, it's not the end of the world. And so I don't need to stop and do a backup. I may not be able to do it because I think I didn't log in as SA today. I'm going to change my user and log in as SA because I don't want this thing to yell at me that I have to be logged in as SA. Since some of these tools require SA login, I'm going to go ahead and give myself that login right now. So what this will do is this will update all work, open, and history transactions. So if I wanted to change the, I realized that I had my GL accounts and I didn't have all my expenses really together. One was way up here, one was way down here. And I can combine them if they should have been the same, I could combine them into one account. Or if the numbering is just a little wonky, like this one's way over here and it's hard to find it because it's a payroll expense that's 100 numbers different or something else, I can modify, it'll update that account number, and all old history, all unposted and all open would be updated. Now you'll notice the second line on there, and that's the case with all of these tools. They do not update external tables. Now, the number one place that I see this is going to be if you use a tool like something like SalesPad. SalesPad is an add-on, it's by Cavallo. They have a tool that runs on top of GP. It pulls exact data for sales, purchasing, inventory, warehouse management. But it gives you a whole lot of extra flexibility on user-defined fields. But the thing is that if I go into GP and I change the user-defined, now that doesn't count for accounts, but for vendors, customers, and items, if I change those, which I am allowed to in GP, it could break that connection. Now that's what happens with customers, vendors, and items. But if you have accounts, and if you, I should have put this, I actually need to fix this. You guys get to see me edit. I put my note in the wrong field. So we're going to go back to financial, and I'm just going to move, this was supposed to go up here. If you're running management reporter with the data mart and you run these, you're going to need to rebuild your data mart after doing this modification. But it's not hard to do. It's a great tool, especially if you do have things that change, but you want to always check. So when in doubt, especially with anything in Pistol or anything in utilities, it's a quick support call versus doing something cuckoo that you have to get fixed and undo, and it's much more complicated. So let's go into here, PSTL or Pistol, go into here, account modifier and combiner. Let's click next. Now I can do this one at a time, or I can import. So let's go ahead into here and let's pick, we're just going to pick one that I don't use that often, and we'll find something. I never use the Singapore ones, but let's just pick something random. And let's just go. Okay. So when I convert that, what will happen is $13.99.99 will be gone, and it'll all move into $13.99.00. So if hit convert and hit continue, And if you're combining and using intercompany, you're going to have to go and also post those batches prior to proceeding. So I'm just going to click OK. So be careful with all that kind of stuff, like a lot of cleanup. Don't have a bunch of unposted GL batches everywhere and try to do this. You want to do it when everything's nice and clean. So you run that. I'm going to close the screen, let that close. It's doing a bunch of updates. And then that's going to update everything. And then we'll be able to have that updated. Now, I forgot to put this in the notes. I can add a note in here if you guys need me to, but there's also modifiers and combiners for customers and vendors. But you're going to notice, see if that's all done. Oh, it's still running. Of course it is. This is the thing about doing live demos, is some of these things take a very long time to do. But we'll let this finish running. The thing with customer, I'll keep going through the slides, we'll come back over. Customers and vendors is they moved them out of PSTL, or the Professional Services Tools Library, and moved them directly under the utilities for sales and for purchasing. So when we get back over, still running, when we get back over, we'll be able to take a look at that. And I think, let's see if it's done. Okay, there we go. So it tells me to reconcile my year. And what that means is that I have to use the reconcile utility in GP to get the summary balances updated for those accounts. Because if I went and looked at the 1399.00, it may say that the current balance is zero, or the amounts per period were zero. When I run the reconcile, it will update those. So that's why you want to always, again, check and make some notes on what you need to do. And we'll go ahead and click OK. And now it's just, again, reminding me to reconcile my years. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close this. Now, it does give you a report that shows you the accounts that were modified. I would recommend you print that or save it as a file somewhere so you know later if someone goes, what happened? You have a record of when you did it. Okay, go ahead and close this window. Now, I'll show you real quick. If I look under purchasing and I look under utilities, there's vendor, modifier, and combiner. And so you can modify them, or you can combine them or modify them. Combiner would take ID1 and move it into a different person, a different existing vendor, and delete the source vendor. Now, again, you can import them. And if you import them, I'll just show you real quick. If I don't want to run it because it'll take a long time. So what it will do is you can import, it's typically a tab or a CSV. And I swear to you, half of them are one way and half are the other. So what I do is I keep that Excel spreadsheet. I put it as an Excel spreadsheet. I save it as a CSV and I save it as a tab. And then one time I'll try one, it'll go, can't read the file, or it'll give you an error. And then you do the other one, it'll work. And then you just make a note. So I know that one of them is tab and one is CSV. I wish they were the same, but sometimes they're different. Okay. Checkbook modifier, that allows you to change the checkbook ID. And that's really good if you did something like you had one checkbook and you just like the bank changed. I know this is getting to be an old example, but I had quite a lot of customers that had accounts at Fleet Bank. Fleet got bought by Bank of America. So for a while, a lot of banks, and there still happens, you get banks that get bought by other banks, and you hire someone new and they don't know that Fleet means Bank of America. You can change the checkbook ID. So it would update work open in history, but again, doesn't update anything external. And if you have any integrations that go, create this in Fleet, and then you change that to BOA for Bank of America, that will fail. So check your integrations, check your customizations to make sure those will work. That's why we test. Now, one in here does not sound very scary, but it has caused people craziness, which is the period modifier. That is if you do a major fiscal year change, like you went from a fiscal year to calendar year, you took away or added fiscal periods, and you want to repopulate things into the correct fiscal period, you have to be very meticulous and like the way that you follow through on each step and you test each step. So that's why something I would route through DexPro support as well. I've heard some horror stories of people doing it wrong. So I want you to know they're out there, but the ones we're going to demo are going to be the ones that I think are okay to use. The ones that are on here that I say ask Dex Pro, I'm being very serious to ask. GL master triggers. This is actually pretty cool. And I'll tell you a scenario where I have had customers use this. I have had customers that have multiple companies in GP. And what they do is they take the chart of accounts is consistent across every company. Like in company one, segment one is 100 for company one. Then it's the 4 or 5 digits for natural account and 3 digits for department, let's just say. So if I'm in company one, that account is that. If I'm in company two, it's going to be that same account if they're doing intercompany or whatever it is. So they wanted to have that if they create a new account, they don't have to go into 8, 10, 20 different companies and create it. What we do is we turn on master triggers. Now, I don't have multiple companies, but I'll show you what the window looks like. So what this allows you to do, you'll see that I just have one database, but I could come from my one database and then you'd see your list of 20, 30, 10, 4, whatever number of companies you have. And then you turn on the one to replicate to, and you can replicate accounts, vendors, and customers. You don't have to replicate all, but that's how you would turn it on. So as a new vendor is added, it'd get added in whatever companies. As a new customers are added, they can be added in all companies. So what we've done in the past, I've done on projects, is we actually create a company that's just a trigger company. So that's just like account master company. There's never data in there. It's just when you create a new account, if you want it to be in all companies, so you don't always want everyone going back and forth, you'd create one company called like account master, and then we would duplicate that to all of those other companies. So that's a great way to use that. Definitely worth if you have multiple companies. Does anybody, I know we've got a couple of you, if any of you think of scenarios that would help you, just type it in the chat or if you have questions, because I can always take a look at that as well. I put the chat up on my side screen. So if I keep looking over there, because I'm looking for your question. Okay. And that just yelled at me because I was trying to duplicate to itself. That's no problem. Okay, next is purchasing tools. Now, there is something in purchasing tools called a 1099 modifier. It's an old tool, it's still there, they didn't get rid of it. I tried to see if I could use it and I actually got an error on something in SQL, but I didn't try to fix it because there's actually an even better tool nowadays for modifying 1099 vendors. So I don't typically recommend using this 1099 modifier. And the reason I don't is if you look at it, the steps to do this is if a vendor was set up as not a 1099, you go through your vendor list and you fix them. So you say, you know, this vendor was 1099 and it was because it was rent. And this vendor's 1099 non-employee compensation. This one was legal. And you go through all this setup and then you run this. And what it does is for whatever year, you can print the report only or process and print report. It will just take every transaction to that vendor and make it that specific 1099 type and 1099 box. It'll update for you. The thing about that is that there's not really any way to say, I only want to update this group of vendors or this one. So I think it's a little kooky to use that one nowadays because the other one is so much better. It's under purchasing, it's under utilities, and it's update 1099 information. And this lets you update the vendor and the 1099 information. So I could say they weren't set up or they were set up as not a 1099, and I'm going to turn them into miscellaneous, or actually nowadays, forget from last year, non-employee compensation. And I would pick the vendor that I want to update. And I could insert. And before I run it, I can run a print from here, which is actually even better to check if it's going to do anything. And I can see what it's going to do is move them from not a 1099 into non-employee compensation and put them into whatever box is used. You can filter not just on vendor, but also on the document date. So if you were only updating 1 year. So all of those reasons under utilities for update 1099 are a lot more powerful than the ones in the original PSTL tool, but it's still out there. If that's something that you want to do, I'd call you until you don't. I'd say use the other one because it's that much better. There are PM master triggers. You'll see that it opens that same window that we were in before. So any of those master triggers you can set them all up at once. PM minimum check. This one was interesting. I never used this one. I turned it on when I was prepping for today, and I'll show you how it works. So I just turn it on here. And if I go to this, there's not a next or anything to do the setup. But what it's for is when you're in purchasing, when you go into transactions, and when you go into build batch, if you go into additional, you can set minimum check amount. So I made it 501. I could say my minimum check amount is $10,000. So if I try to do a select check, we'll just see if I can do one real fast. And I'm gonna see if we can select based on, we'll just pick some vendor IDs, see what we get. Now between these, there should be some vendors with balances. I'll just double check that. I'm going to use my navigation list, and I have one set up that has their current balance. I'll show you. I cover this in my user workbook, but you can see, oh, you know what? Name, let's sort it by name. Oh, Peaches, do it this way, by ID. Okay. Well, now everybody has a zero balance. I think I paid everybody off. Oh, no, current balance is zero. That helps. I'll say is not. Let's just see. Okay, good. So I do have somebody in the A's all the way through. So I should be getting some, but nobody's over $10,000 unless I get to the E's. So let's go through the E's just to see what happens. So I already have some checks in there, but let's take this out and we'll put an E in here. We'll put an F. Get this one. Remove this. Now, again, I made my minimum 10,000. It says it up in the top toolbar, and we're going to continue. It'll take a second, but we'll see if it changes the amount of the total. Okay, so now we can see that, and let's go into edit payment batch. Now you'll see here, it added fabrication because they had 129,000, but all those other ones, even though we owe them money, we're not getting them because they're under that minimum check amount. So would you use that all the time? Maybe no, but I wouldn't make the minimum $10,000, but I may not want to send out checks for people that we only owe $3 to or 35 cents to, because it's more expensive to send a stamp. I'll wait till we owe the money again. So it just prevents you from accidentally sending out checks for a quarter when you could just write that off or wait till you owe them a little more. Okay. Select checks combiner. Now I just did the select checks or the create payment batch window. The window name changed a few versions ago. And let's say the first time I ran it based on due date. Anything due by the end of the week. Okay, then the next time I did it, but I do want to pay everybody that's in vendor class for utilities. Okay, I run that. And then I go, oh, and I also want to pay, so whatever it is, I don't care if it's current or not due yet, I'm just going to pay them off. And I also want to pay anybody who has discount date. So I've run that. Well, let's say that there's a vendor who's a utility who also has discounts and also has things that are due. So I ran it the first time, maybe the last one, I just pulled all the utilities. So I ran it the first time, it did things that were due. So it creates payment one. Then the second time I run it, it found some that the discount was going to expire. Okay, it picks bank two. And then I ran it based on everything for that class. I would have had 3 checks. What this will do is see that every time we searched, it just adds it to a payment. So you only get 1 payment for vendor if they're allowed to have 1 payment per vendor. So that's what that allows to happen. Okay. Any questions on those? Because I know we're going through these kind of quick. We've got about a half an hour to go. If anybody types a question, I'll see it. So I'll just take a look. I want to be kind if you guys are slow typers. I'm a typo typer if people are waiting for me. Okay, so I'll see it pop up if you do type one in. There are additional purchasing tools. So I'll explain these top 2, but I'll tell you my favorite. Vendor name modifier. Now this is a great tool if you have someone who had a whole lot of typos, Or if I've had people who decided all of a sudden they want the vendor names to be in all caps, this is a way to fix that. So you can export it like a smart list out to Excel. And let's just do, you guys are gonna have patience because I'm gonna do one because I just got to. I'm gonna go into smart list and I'm only gonna do 3 vendors. We're just gonna pick 3 and I'm just gonna go purchasing and vendors. And let's just take new vendors. Okay, so I've only got a few in here anyway. And they're all kind of over the place with IDs. Let's just go ahead and put this out. I don't need all these columns, but just for quickness, I'll put this out in Excel. Okay, I'm only going to update. Let's update these ones. Okay, and I'll just do these ones because they're kind of funky names. So let's go ahead and insert a column. We don't need any of these other columns. We're just going to go delete. And you don't even need a header. It's just going to be the old name. And my new name is going to be okay. So now I've got my thing. I'm going to go ahead and save this file, save as, and I'm just going to save this to my desktop. We'll put that out there. So I'll find it. There, webinar demos. I'll put it into here. And I'm just going to save this. I'm going to try it one way. I'm going to try it tab delimited. So what I'm going to do is call this, I'm pretty sure it's tab, but as soon, every time I say that, it ends up being the other one. And then we're going to save it a second time. And we're going to make it into a text, and it will be a CSV there. I hate how there's 1,000 ones that are CSV, but this is it. Okay. I picked the wrong one. Oh no, there it is. No, it was like, I hate that there's 400. Okay, so we're gonna go here and say CSV, and then I'm gonna save. And I'm gonna close, and I'm gonna go into my PSTL tool. And I'm gonna do my, oh, we're doing vendor, which this one's not a PSTL tool, which is ironic since I'm showing you it. It works the same as the ones for items, so or items and GL. It's just this is the one that moved. So same template-y idea. This is just one that moved out. So we're going to come in here and modify. We're going to bring in the tab delimited, and we'll go to desktop, and we'll go to webinar demos and see. Oh, see now I was wrong. Some of them are tabbed, some are CSV, and it doesn't even see the one that's tabbed. So that's how I know the CSV is right. We're going to hit validate. It found them and it populated the table. And then we just hit process. It reminds me to do a backup, and I hit continue. Now I'm doing 2 vendors. It went really quick. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And it modified them. So if I look, there's not even a vendor anymore called task tab with the original ID. If I come in here and do a lookup, there's not the one without those 001s, and it moved any, and I picked somebody that didn't have any transactions. Let's see if we have, if this one, tax test is right here. I picked ones that, of course, I did ones that didn't have history. It would have moved history over had I picked ones that did. Okay. Now the minimum PO, the name modifier is, again, can be done similar. It's if you see things like you want to fix spelling, you see a bunch of them where the name starts with the word the, and you want to remove it, things like that, you can use that import. Minimum PO receipt, I've never had to use this, but what this does, and if you read the documentations, it just sets the next number for the PO or the receipt, so it doesn't go back if there was a weird skip, or if you want to reset it, it kind of forces it to always be that number or above. I've never had to use it. but it's there. If you see weird number things happening, it's good to know. This is one I really like. If you've ever done a purchase order, if you go into purchasing and you do a PO, the standard functionality is that it will look for the combination of the item and the vendor, and it will use the last recorded purchase price. But you might say, well, that's wacky because we had a sale, or we were accounting for a freight and we put it into the price. So what you can do instead is say, no, I want it to pull the cost from see how the current cost is $20. Standard is 17. Now that's a huge difference because I do some weird stuff in my demos. So if I come into this one, so multi-core processor, I'm going to move this guy over and I go into my PSTLs, close some of these out. Oh, I didn't mean to close that, but that's okay. I'm going to go into PSTL and I'm going to go to cost defaulter and hit next. Now, if you notice, it says current. If I say standard, let's just take a look and click OK and just close this out. Oh, I already did that. I don't need to do it twice. And let's do, I want to see who they're assigned to. Vendors. Okay, they're assigned to capital. So let's go and say PO entry. Okay. And the item is this one. And oh, there we go. Oh, and I ordered it in case of 5. Let's change I have my defaulting 2 cases because that was another demo I did. So if I order 1 at 16,000, which should be the price that's listed on there, and I'm not sure why it's 16. I probably did something funky. Might be something else I did funky. But yeah, so we can come in and we can adjust that. If we look at this, it might be that that's what I did on the vendor, and it may be pulling that. So yeah, it does pull that one because I'm pulling the cost from in there. So it can override that from there if needed. Go ahead and close out. Okay, so otherwise it'll just use one or the other, and you can set that from the PSTL. I know it's because they don't have warehouse in there. Okay. Next. The next set is sales tools. Customer name modifier, same thing. We can import. You're very, very rarely going to have an integration based on name because most programmers, and I don't want to say anything bad about because there are great programmers out there that might have done this, but it's not best practice. We wouldn't want to connect on an editable field. We'd connect on the key field or the ID because that field is the same on the transaction, the work, the history. It's the same. So if they're not going to worry about that. So you don't have to be too worried about custom integrations, but because I say that, you're going to find you might be the one company where we do need to test it. So I always say test, test, test. RM master triggers, that's the same as we talked about for items and for vendors and for GL, that when you create like a company and you can have that company copy to other companies. You can't go back and forth, so it's always one direction. So that's why sometimes we'll set up a master trigger company. RM transactions unapplied. This is one of my favorite tools. If we go into GP and we take a look on sales, if we don't push GL to history, it will always show up in this window. So if I come in here, I haven't paid them. That's a company I'm testing. So if I come in here and take a look, you can see how there's history open, but that open is a 0 balance. That's a 0 balance, but there's listed as open. And that's because we haven't pushed the GL to history. So if the GL has been pushed to history, which is just done under routines, and it's done under paid transaction removal, and as long as the customer is set to save history, I have all this in my year-end workbook, by the way, about best practice for month end for AR. So if I move this, I'm just going to do that one customer, Aaron Fitz. They're my main test one. I use them all the time. And I'm going to hit process. And I'm not using any cutoffs now. There could be some future dated stuff. That's why it's not coming off. We'll just take a look. as long as the customer set to save history. So now it pushed some extra stuff to history. Let's say now you get a call from the customer and they said, why did you apply that payment to that invoice? It was supposed to go to this other invoice. That's where the RM unapply tool will come in handy. So I have a shortcut to it here on my toolbar. And I'm just going to click it. And I can pull up the customer. It doesn't autofill in this window. So you do have to do a lookup or type in the full ID. And now you're going to see all these transactions that are moved to history. I can even uncheck work and open and redisplay. Now you can unapply both directions, but I've seen people do kooky stuff. Like if they came in and unapply, I'm going to do a report only and I'll go to screen. I've seen them do something and for whatever reason, it like messes with way more transactions when you come from the invoice. But when you go from the payment, that makes logical sense because you're unapplying the payment. So I just go down to the payments. I find the one that was applied to that invoice or the payment, the credit that I need to fix. I uncheck and I always do report only. And I always say one payment. I don't ever say unapply all. If I unapply all, I'll hit it because I'm doing a report only. And let's go to screen and see if it's the same. Now it could be the same both for this one. It's just unapplying that, but let's see if I go back and I unapply it. Where is it? I'll do report only again and one payment. Yeah, so it's just moving that payment back to open it. The invoice it applied to wasn't fully paid off, so it didn't even move an invoice back to open. But it's always good to do a report first, and then you can unapply. It doesn't delete it, but it may cause journal entries in cases where you took a discount, trade discount, not trade discount, a terms discount, or have done a write-off. If you do it at the time of applying, it'll unapply those and void them because you're, or reverse them because you're unapplying. So just be aware of that. I wouldn't give everyone in the office like, welcome to our company, here's the screen to do unapply, but someone who's an AR manager or someone who has that level, it's a good screen for them to have for cleanup, or even if you don't give them security, for them to know that they can report to you, this payment needs to be unapplied. You can have someone unapply it with that level of security, and then you're good to go. Okay. Next. Oh, salesperson modifier, blah, blah, changes IDs. I'm not going to speak about that forever. Customer item lookup. Now what this will do, you have to, once you turn it on, I have mine turned on, customer item lookup, is you have to go into sales. I'm not going to run it because I've run it before and we're getting low on time. If you go under setup for sales order processing, and you go to additional, it's weirdly over here. I mean, it is sales order processing, but it's funny that it doesn't just do it next because I feel like it should. You have to come over here and do this create initial lookup data. Okay. Now, what I can do is go over into sales order processing transactions. And if I pull up, I'll just pull up an invoice. We'll see who's these for. I'm going to pick, let's see if there's anything good. We'll pick one of these. Yeah. So if you come up into additional and you do historical lookup, it'll look for things you've sold to them in the past. It tries to find the same item that you're clicked on. Usually it'll try to find that. Otherwise, it just kind of sorts them. And then you can see what they paid before. And that's handy if someone's using the screen as an entry and the customer's like, well, what did we buy last time? Or last time it was cheaper. What was it that we got last time? It's not the same. And you can go, oh, we discontinued that item, but you know, blah, blah, blah. You have information about it there. And I just got that by additional and historical lookup. Okay, next. The territory modifier and combiner, same as all the other modifiers and combiners. Backup test, it's not going to update external, but it does help if that's made a major change. SOP PO number check. I like this one, and I have a customer who really relies on this one. For them, it's very important that their PO numbers are unique. They can't reuse one because it's project-based for their customers, their main customers. So it'll tell them when they're trying to enter a new invoice, quote, order, this PO number already exists on this other invoice number. Warn and ask. It can also warn and reject, warn and require a password. So there could be like, nope, you can't go forward, or is this okay? There's different options for that. Also, you can turn on that the PO is now required. So you could say, well, we don't really know the PO number during a quote, but once they place the order, and once we are, or if we're just going direct to invoice, we do want to require the PO. Normally that's not a required field, but this can make it a required field. So it's a cool way to make an extra field required that may be critical for you for payment from customers. Okay. Payroll tools. There's only 2 tools. This one I would check if you are doing payroll and project accounting for GP. I don't know that this report is needed anymore. If it is, I would just check with DexPro support before trying to use this report. It was an older added report when they started to connect payroll and project accounting. I don't know that you'd need to run this anymore. There might be a newer feature in one of these modules anyway, but I didn't see any updates, so I included it, but I would double check with DexPro support. Employee modifier, there is an option that updates the employee ID, but again, it doesn't update external tables. And if you are integrating outside of GP for anything to do with payroll, you want to be careful. Inventory. Site combiner, I have warehouse 1 and warehouse 2. We're merging those. We're bringing all the material in. We're getting rid of warehouse 2. You can combine existing sites and quantities and it'll delete the existing site. Test this, because think of all the tables you could be affecting: open POs, open sales orders, if anything integrated. Test that, because it is a big change, because it's lots of detail, but it is out there and it works. Site ID, same thing. It'll change the site ID used on transactions for work open in history. It's like the other ID never existed. So it's kind of like renaming the ID. Item description modifier, that allows you to change the item description. So that's a good way to fix typos or be more consistent in the descriptions. Again, most integrations aren't built on that, but you may have a random wackadoodle thing, so test. Number, this one lets you combine 2 numbers together. We set up an item, we realized we already had the same item, we just called it something else because we bought it from a different vendor, but they really are the same thing. Let's combine them and just have 2 vendors assigned. Item number modifier, similar to everything else, that lets you change the number. Now, item reconciler, there is a utility called item reconcile. This one uses the same guts, like the same behind the scenes code runs, but it's smart enough to go through the list of items first to see which need reconciling. So if you have 10,000 items and only 400 have activity, and it can figure out that those are the only ones that need to get reconciled, it's going to be much quicker. So good way to double check. Okay. Miscellaneous tools, there's fixed asset modifier, same function as we talked about before. It's going to change the ID number. Default add for POP and SOP. This one I do like having, and I do have this one, I believe, turned on. Let's just double check. And it's, oh, we don't have it turned on. Let's turn it on and let's close this. I may have to, if it doesn't pop in, it might be because I'm already in the window. So let's close this and we'll just go into a new PO quick. We've got about 5 minutes. Okay, so PO entry. Normally, if I come in, oops, I went too far, one back. And I started to just type in my name thing and I was like, this is a test. It would just tab to the next of unit of measure because it's treating it like a non-inventoried item. But what this does is it keeps looping to this. And then if I say no, then I can keep going as non-inventory. But it's a way to prompt me. What I've seen it do is protect you if people do typos in item numbers. They don't realize it. They're new. They just type in the number and 100, and it should be XLG, but they do XL6. Because that's what it looked like to them. And you want to place, yes, I do. And then do I want to add this? When I say no, what's happening is I've seen people do this. You would think that the fact that it didn't default the unit of measure, it didn't default the description, that they type it all in there. And then at the end of the day, you have a non-inventoried item that you can't sell, you can't track. So turning that on makes it have at least one check and balance to check that it's gonna be added. Oh, you know what? I should have highlighted because I like to have doc date verify turned on. Oh, sorry. I'm gonna go out here. And I like this one to be turned on. Okay. It prevents dates on the subledger that are wacky. What I've seen before is customers will have a date like 5/15, instead of 2021, it'll say 50/21. It'll prevent that type of thing. So just a good way to prevent that kind of stuff. Next, I've never had to use decimal place tool. And what that does is if you have a longer decimal place, especially for foreign currency, it cuts the words down to just be the first two decimals. Company copy, we use that a lot at DexPro when we're creating additional new companies, or in the beginning of an implementation, we'll use this. So what that does is it makes creating the companies easier because it can copy the master records. It's not the same as creating a test company with a copy of your transactions. That's done separately. This is just creating the master records and all the setup for you. That's basically it. Okay, so we're at our end time. There's a link here to the GP docs, and I put that in the chat already for you. If you take a look at that, that's the latest, greatest information on PSTL. And it's a good thing to bookmark in general. If you go back up to welcome to GP and bookmark this, this is going to be all kinds of cool stuff. They've really put a lot of work recently into updating this. And you can see into here, there's also information about product downloads and hot fixes and the life cycle and all that. The other thing I also wanted to make sure is that if you guys aren't aware, DexPro is working really hard to provide a lot of GP and Power BI training. Some of them are free 1-hour events, and some are those ones that have been recorded, so you can come back and watch those. We also will have 4-hour trainings. And you can see there's things coming up for Power BI. I have a Smart List Builder class coming up. So take a look at those, and then you'll be able to register for those. Those are longer, more in-depth classes. So I hope this gives you a good idea of what you can do with the PSTL tools. I'm going to go back over here. If you have questions or comments on anything you saw today, always you can reach out to support@dexprodynamics.com. If you'd like to set up a free system review with DexPro, you can email Marlena, that's MARLENA @dexprodynamics.com. My name's Amber. My email's at amber@dexprodynamics.com. And we're very happy to help you with personalized training. So we've had a lot of customers that say, I want to have it specifically for us. I want you to cover this specific issue we're having. That's where you can contact us and we'll help you. If you want this training, the training that we do in those group trainings, just go ahead and register on the website. But thank you guys again so much for either attending today, or if this is you're in the future and you're looking at this recording that I did. I hope you enjoyed our training today and that you learned a little bit more about the PSTL tools. They are free and included, and we want you to get the most out of GP. Thank you guys again for attending, and have a great afternoon.